Welcome back to Dan Recaps. Today, I'm going to explain the movie Pawn Sacrifice, released in the year 2014. The movie opens in Brooklyn, New York in 1951. Bobby Fischer is the child of a Soviet immigrant named Regina. His mother always tells him not to talk to any strangers, as she believes the FBI is keeping an eye on her due to her support for the communist movement in the United States. Although just 8 years old, Bobby already has a great passion for playing chess and spends most of his time perfecting his game and analyzing different moves. Noticing this interest, Regina takes him to a chess club where he impresses the chess master enough to convince him to take him on as a student. Over time, as Bobby outwits many adult competitors, people start to take notice of this rising star in the chess world while he keeps studying different books on the game. One night, as Bobby immerses himself in a magazine about Russian chess players, he is continuously disrupted by Regina and her boyfriend, leading to an argument and forcing Regina to move out of the house. The next day, Bobby's sister Joan tells him their mother is moving to California. Even though she says she is doing it so her son can be happy, Bobby thinks she's always wanted to leave with her boyfriend anyway and is just doing it for herself. Now able to focus all his attention on the game, Bobby continues his winning streak and soon becomes the youngest grandmaster ever. While participating in the Chess Olympiad in Bulgaria, Bobby realizes that Russian players are intentionally drawing the games with full support from the Federation. Bobby protests, saying the system makes it impossible for a non-Soviet player to win, and decides to quit chess. A few days later, Bobby is approached by Paul Marshall, a lawyer who tries to convince him to return to chess, saying Russian supremacy in the game can only be challenged by him, while also assuring Bobby that he will lead the case to amend the rules of the game and give him an equal opportunity to win. While Bobby considers the offer, Paul meets Father William Lombardi, a former junior chess champion and priest, and asks him to join Bobby's training team. Although reluctant, William agrees to meet with Bobby anyway, and is instantly amazed by Bobby's skill when he points out the mistakes he had made in previous games. Now ready to join his team, William tells Bobby that chess tournaments are part of diplomacy now, but Bobby doesn't care, only wanting to win. Despite rising tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, a few Soviet players travel to California for some friendly matches, where Bobby is asked to lead the US team. Although a great chess player, Bobby's tantrums grow worse with time as he starts demanding more and more. In the meantime, the leading Russian player Boris Spassky is advised to be careful of Bobby. In their hotel room, as they prepare for the first game, William tries to give Bobby some background about his opponents, but he reveals he is already aware of every game they have ever played. Bobby wins his first game against Ivanovic, who is ranked 4th best in the world, and becomes the first US player to beat any Russian in chess. As everyone starts hoping Bobby will win the next game as well, he arrogantly hands over a list of demands to Paul, saying that unless they are fulfilled, he won't play. Bobby's next game will be against world champion Boris Spassky. Everyone says it'll be the greatest test of his skill, but Bobby remains calm and spends the night with his new friend Donna. The next morning, tensions rise in both camps as everyone anticipates a tough game between two great players. But surprisingly, Bobby loses. William and Paul try to calm him down, but he angrily walks off without even accepting his trophy for second place. Bobby spends the night at the beach thinking about Spassky's game, while Bill and Paul wonder if he is even capable of beating him now. William later questions Paul about his frequent calls to Washington, and he reveals people in high positions are very interested in these matches, as chess is now being called away to prove intellectual supremacy over their enemies. By this time, however, William has become worried about Bobby's mental health as he is gradually becoming delusional, but Paul ignores his concerns. When Bobby wakes up the next day, he spots Spassky and his team at the beach and picks a fight with them, thinking they are trying to follow him. Sometime later, Bobby returns to the international competitions with intentions of beating the grandmasters, but openly expresses his thoughts about the Russian players. His paranoia only gets stronger with time, as he believes he is being spied on by the KGB. His sister Joan later meets with Paul to discuss Bobby's mental health problems and tells him he is showcasing signs of paranoia and delusional psychosis. As proof, Joan pulls out his recent letters to her, in which he insists that Soviets and Jewish people are behind his losses because they want to control the world of chess. Joan is extremely worried about her brother and begs Paul to consult a psychiatrist for him. During the World Championship, Bobby manages to beat the Russian grandmaster and becomes the talk of the town, as experts believe he now has a chance to defeat Spassky. As Bobby is now a star, Paul excitedly tells him that many media outlets want to interview him, but advises him not to mention anything about spies because it makes people worried about him. Bobby realizes he is talking about Joan and scolds him for meeting his family members behind his back, threatening to fire Paul if he does it again, and leaves the car with William, who calms him down and takes him back to the hotel room. Paul now agrees they have to take him to see a psychiatrist, but William knows Bobby will never accept the help that he needs. Bobby, who is now a celebrity, is interviewed by several TV channels where he calls himself the greatest chess player of all time. After a while, as William and Paul prepare him for the World Championship in Reykjavik, Iceland, Bobby demands all his food be cooked in front of him because he believes someone might try to poison him. When he arrives to the airport with Paul, he is disturbed to see a lot of reporters and storms off, even missing the inauguration ceremony. That night, Bobby secretly calls his sister Joan to share that Paul had promised to keep the photographers away, but didn't. Joan realizes his unstable condition as he once again tells her that the KGB is trying to get him killed because he is the best player in the world. Joan then says she wants to come and meet him, but Bobby tells her not to and hangs up the phone. Paul then shows up to inform him that all his demands had been fulfilled and convinces him to participate in the championship anyway. Bobby eventually flies to Iceland under tight security, where Paul arranges a secluded house for him to stay in, as chess is now being considered a way to prove whether the American or Soviet system is better. President Nixon and the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger are watching the tournament closely. The most anticipated match between Bobby and Spassky begins on July 11, 1972, and the entire world is glued to their screens to support their favorite players. However, during the first game, Bobby becomes distracted by minor disturbances like the flashbulbs of the photographers, the camera rolls, and even the audience. He starts complaining that his concentration is being compromised and requests the authorities move the cameras away from him. A bit more satisfied, Bobby then returns to the game but loses against Spassky. Upset and overwhelmed, Bobby leaves the venue while telling Paul and William that there was way too much noise around him and that he needs the game shifted somewhere else. Meanwhile, Spassky's team congratulates him, but he is not content with his win as he believes Bobby intentionally made a wrong move. Bobby once again tells his team he won't be resuming the games because he believes the authorities have rigged the games to make him lose. Now frustrated with his constant tantrums, Paul begins to argue with Bobby, but he doesn't care and gives him another list of even more demands, in which he insists the games be played without an audience or cameras and that he needs a different chessboard because this one makes noise when he makes a move. By the time the second game comes around, as his requirements have yet to be met, Bobby does not show up for the second game and loses by forfeit. It is then announced he has only 24 hours to let the Federation know if he wants to continue, otherwise Spassky will be declared the winner by default. While the world waits for his answer, Bobby trashes his place to get rid of any bugs which he is sure the Russians have planted to keep an eye on him. Bill and Paul keep trying to convince him to come out of his room and play because the game is considered the most important thing in the ongoing Cold War between the two countries. Meanwhile, Spassky is humiliated, thinking his win is not worth it this way. Spassky now also starts showing similar symptoms as Bobby, thinking that the US team has been trying to get him distracted, believing Bobby's tantrums are a way to avoid facing him because the US know they can't beat him. Spassky tells his team to fulfill Bobby's demands to get him to play because he does not to win by forfeit. Paul then hurries to visit Bobby again and inform him that Spassky has agreed to change the venue. The third game is held in a quiet room with no audience and only one camera to broadcast it. As soon as the game begins, Bobby starts playing in an unconventional manner and the whole world watches in surprise. Although Spassky's team thinks he can still make a comeback, Bobby unexpectedly wins the third game. This instantly makes Bobby the most famous person in the world and everyone starts cheering for him. The fourth game is a draw, but in the next one, Spassky becomes paranoid and starts claiming there is something wrong with his chair, which is making him lose focus, and Bobby wins. The sixth game soon begins in the main hall after Bobby agrees to once again play in front of an audience. He again starts off the match by playing in an unconventional way, amusing the audience around the world as no one has ever made such moves before. When Bobby finally wins the game, he even gets a standing ovation from Spassky himself. Bobby becomes the youngest world champion in history, and the winning game is called the greatest game in chess history. The world applauds him, but Bobby's mental condition continues to worsen as he feels disconnected from his surroundings. The epilogue tells us how Bobby later turned down several endorsements, forfeit all his own titles, and disappeared from the limelight. In 1980, he was arrested for vagrancy and later claimed that he was tortured in jail. Bobby's story does not end here, however, as he resurfaced in 1992 to play a game against Spassky in Belgrade. However, as this violated the US sanctions at the time, the government released a warrant for his arrest. With no plans to ever return home, Bobby claimed asylum in Iceland, where he died in 2008 as a fugitive. That was all from the video. Subscribe for more content like this and leave a like to help the channel out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Take care